In the first chapter of this book, Lost America's Antiquities, A Hidden History, I share examples of how history has been handed down to our day by quoting Will Durant, who, after writing his multi-volume history of the world, pointed out how history can become greatly distorted over time. He stated, "Our knowledge of past events is always incomplete, probably inaccurate, beclouded by ambivalent evidence and biased historians, and perhaps distorted by our own patriotic and religious partisanship." Now, oftentimes, history is like viewing the nightly news. It's a matter of perspective. It's like changing the TV channel from Fox to NBC to CNN. There always seems to be a political twist associated with every major news event, as history is oftentimes socially engineered, advanced by historians who do have religious, political, social prejudices and agendas, shared by those in power, usually the victor. As the African proverb states, "Until lions have their own historians, the tale of the hunt shall always glorify the hunter." Robert P. George stated, he's a Princeton professor, said, "Oftentimes what we know about history is just propaganda." Now, do you feel like I'm kind of laying the groundwork here to let you know that we've maybe been duped with some of the history that has been handed down to us? A good example of this is the story of Columbus' discovery of America, which oftentimes starts with the myth of the flat earth. Thomas Aquinas and other notable scholars and philosophers of medieval times in Europe all knew that the earth was round. The idea that these thinkers, prior to Columbus, believing that the earth was flat is preposterous, as pointed out by Thomas E. Woods in his book, How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. Even Andrew Dixon White, in his 2-volume History of Warfare and Science, goes on to say, "The evidence is overwhelming, that refuting the myth of the flat earth is like refuting the idea that the moon is made of cheese." These men observed, as they looked at the moon, they looked at the sun and saw the shapes. They stood on the shore and watched the ship's mast slowly disappear over the horizon. To think that they didn't know that this world was round is kind of preposterous. So has history and the sciences been used as a tool in shaping societal's views and perceptions? And is it being used today in a like manner? Such as, who really discovered America? Every October, America celebrates Columbus Day. And why do we do that? Was Columbus really the first to sail the ocean blue and land in America's shores in 1492? The truth of the matter is that in his maiden voyage, Columbus really never set foot on the North American shore. Yes, he landed in the Caribbean islands, now referred to the Bahamas, on October 12, 1492. So who was really the first? Who was really the first to come to America? The History Channel last October, in showing a brand new documentary they had out there, it's called The History of the World in 2 Hours. And it went on to say, for the first time, Columbus brought 2 continents together. For the first time, these continents became connected. Was Columbus really the first? Many historians from many parts of the world find it quite humorous that here in America, that we still celebrate the idea that Columbus discovered America as if there were not others here before. As Professor Kehoe stated, the feasibility of crossing the Atlantic to the Americas in small crafts has been repeatedly demonstrated. As she cataloged some 17 crossings of small boats, regarding the possibility of transoceanic contact with America before Columbus, in 1492, Dr. Kehoe said, "Only one fact needs to be stated, that every type of boat and sailing raft has been proven capable in experienced hands of traversing the ocean. The presumed utter isolation of America before Columbus is implausible. To a mariner in a sailboat, the ocean waterways become highways. The emerging evidence shows a pre-Columbian contact in America to be extensive. So the question really isn't who was here before Columbus. The question is who wasn't here before Columbus. Historians from many foreign lands share their histories of their pre-Columbian voyages, such as the Vikings, the Assyrians, the Phoenicians, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Jews, the Polynesians, the Japanese, the Chinese, the Welsh, and the list goes on, all of which make claim that they had seafaring vessels capable of braving the ocean. Driven by the prevailing winds and currents, they visited many foreign shores. A modern example of this, as Rod pointed out, was the 2000 sailing of the Phoenicia. In October 2009, a replica of the ancient Phoenician ship, which was built in Lebanon. The ship's name was named the Phoenicia, built from ancient plans owned by the British Museum, dated 600 BC. As it set sail from Lebanon down the Red Sea, as it was looking to circumnavigate around Africa. Well, what happened is they stopped 3 times down the east coast of Africa, but upon turning the corner at the Bay of Good Hope there, their hope was to stop about 5 times up the west coast of Africa. But it only had one big mast. It had a shallow hull, and it couldn't effectively tack back against the currents and the prevailing winds. And so it was picked up and it was taken and driven ever westward, as they were planning to actually have 5 stops up the west coast of Africa. And so they were fighting it all the way, but it pushed them within 350 miles of landing in the Americas before they could pick up the upper currents and make it back to their home. So this is what really the slave traders had learned, to follow the currents, that they could go back and forth. And this is how, ships would come often to the Americas, both North, South, and Central America. I'm going the wrong way. Today, the debate still rages as to whether or not there were many ancient migrations to America or just one. A single origin referred to as monogenism, which espouses the idea that virtually all the early inhabitants of North America migrated across the Bering Straits land bridge some 40,000 years ago, or polygenism, the idea that America was populated by a multitude of cultures arriving in America from different origins at different times. Since the middle 1900s, the U.S. government, ethnological community, elevated their efforts to classify the Indian tribes by assembling them in harmonious groups based on the relationship of blood, language, customs, belief, and grades of culture. It was found that within the area of the United States that there are spoken over 500 languages as distinct from one another as French is from English, and that these languages are grouped in more than 50 linguistic families, along with a large number of diverse linguistic families from hundreds of different tribes that existed here in North America. Many of these tribes have been found to have differing traditions, DNA, and oral histories, making it more increasingly difficult to hold to the traditional view that virtually all the North American Indians came across the Bering Straits, as espoused by Lewis Henry Morgan and other mainstream anthropologists today. Dr. Donald Yates, a DNA expert, who is actually part Cherokee, in which we interview in our documentary, he said, as a DNA expert, he says, well, it wasn't my family that was chasing woolly mammoths across the Bering Straits 40,000 years ago. He says, in fact, I know better. Mine, I followed the DNA, and I can trace my family to the hills of Galilee. So, who were these ancient cultures that were here in North America?
Settled places. The agriculture, the urban design, the engineering, and the astronomy that preceded us, preceded we European Americans, are not quite us. They are other people, we felt. And in the European American tradition, there's a long, long history of our saying to ourselves, oh no, that's those people. And those people can't be as good as us people. They couldn't have built those great big things.
Thankfully, today's scientific community is beginning to take a renewed look at what artifacts in ancient cities yet remain, such as these once city walls, unintentionally preserved as mounds
Intentionally,
in a golf
we've changed
course
it.
in Newark, Ohio.
I'm standing here at the parallel walls that connect the gigantic octagon with a large circle. The circle is 1,054 feet in diameter. The octagon encloses 50 acres, which is large enough to encompass 4 Roman Colosseums. This was built by the ancient Hopewell culture that lived in this region between about 100 BC and AD 400.
The level of precision, it is incredible.
The entire Newark Earthworks encompasses 4.5 square miles, and it was the largest complex of geometric earthworks ever built in the world. It includes 2 circles, a gigantic octagon, a square, but actually what we call the Hopewell culture, things like it at least, and things related to it, covered much of eastern North America in different parts. As far south as Florida, as far west as Kansas City, as far east as perhaps New York.
They had to be incredibly sophisticated to be able to build these mounds perfectly, in unison to an octagon shape and a circular shape.
It's clear that they rival, by any scale, any other cultural achievement in the world. The Great Pyramids, the Great Wall of China, the Roman Colosseum.
I'm not that surprised by it. There's so many other things that we see when we start learning about and looking into Native culture that I think people on the surface may be surprised because they tend to think of Indian people as anti-intellectual or, non-scientific or somehow, living in the backwoods and not knowledgeable about things like that.
The knowledge embedded in these earthworks and encoded in their structure is anything but primitive. It's remarkable.
It also shows that not just high math, but these sites are lined up primarily with the lunar calendar. They had high math, they understood geometry, and because of the lunar calendar, they also understood the heavens, astronomy.
What I've learned now is just how amazing they were in terms of their knowledge of the solar system and of mathematics.
And the lunar calendar comes from the Mediterranean, and then they had the unit of measurement was 606, which they call the stade. One side of the Great Pyramid from the base to the tip of the apex is 606 feet. If you square inside the octagon, which the surveyors like to call, it's a term they use, squaring the circle, and you divide that up into 4 equal parts inside of cubes, you'll find those cubes are all made of 606-foot lines per cube side. The angle of the Great Pyramid of Egypt runs 51.8 degrees up the slope from the base to the angle. That measurement is there, and when you come off of the baseline at Newark and you run true north and then measure that angle back to the baseline, what do we find? 51.8 degrees. So did they have the same math as the ancient Egyptians? Well, I gotta say, yeah, it sure looks like it.
It's as inspiring, I think, in its way as the NASA program to send a man to the moon.
Most of the Mediterranean societies, civilizations, ran their calendar on the lunar cycle, or a 13-month calendar. And that can be fully demonstrated with the Hopewell people as well. Again, another nice parallel to the Mediterranean contact.
And what a special place it is. You feel that right away. You feel it immediately when you're there. I was in a kind of strange position because I was on a job interview when they took me to the site, and I was literally just from the presence of the place moved to tears and felt kind of uncomfortable as a person in a job interview, but yet having these strong emotional feelings and some connection to this place and the history that was there. And it just occurred to me, how could this be?